That new channel smell. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Sounds Good Makes Sense, a discussion show for the World of Warcraft player and so on. My name is Devilor, and today I want to talk a little bit about FOMO. We'll explain a little bit about what FOMO is, though I don't feel like I need to go into too much detail. It's pretty well known at this point. We're also going to talk a bit about how games tend to try to utilize FOMO and exactly what it is that they're doing, especially for live service games that tend to really lean on FOMO quite a bit. We're also going to talk about why developers actually do that, not just how are they doing things, but why are they doing them? What's the motivation for it? And of course, what is the effect that that's having on the gaming industry and how gaming is existing in 2025? But also, welcome everyone to our brand new channel here on YouTube, youtube.com/@soundsgoodmakessense. If you didn't see the previous update video, we have officially moved over to this brand new channel. We're going to put nothing but Sounds Good Makes Sense and related to Sounds Good Makes Sense sort of things here on this channel. So that way this will exist purely as a way to keep up with the show and similar sorts of content that I'm going to be putting out. The other channel will still hang around. We are still going to use that other channel. It's going to be focused mostly on, I'm going to start live streaming there again, as well as things like YouTube shorts, you know, things that we've cut down from stuff that's happened on stream. And other sort of like variety content will be occurring on youtube.com/devilor as I get around to it. But this channel here, youtube.com/@soundsgoodmakessense, this is going to be where you get all of your SGMS going forward. So please do me a favor, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Tell your friends, tell your guildmates, tell your therapist to come and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I could probably use one anyway if you got a good recommendation. But besides all of that, please do remember to hit that subscribe button. Do whatever the bell ringing thing is. I'm not a very good YouTuber. I don't have a good handle on the correct series of words to say to get notifications about my videos when I put them out. But do all of those things. Leave a comment, etc. Any little clicks and anything like that that you guys can do, especially while we're just getting this channel off the ground, really helps with engagement for the channel, which in turn helps the video get spread out a little bit further and hopefully helps more people find this content. Anyway, all of that shenaniganery besides, let's talk about FOMO. Let's explain a little bit what this is. Obviously, FOMO stands for the fear of missing out. It's the concept of creating an environment in which a player, if we're talking about gaming industry specifically, in which a player feels like they need to do something and they need to do it right now, because if they don't, they're going to lose the opportunity to do that later. It creates that fear, more or less, of if I don't jump on this right now, I'm going to miss out on whatever this is, whether it's a temporary event, limited time event sort of thing, whether it's a reward that's only available for a certain amount of time, whether it's a shop purchase that's only available for a limited amount of time. It's trying to create that sense of if you don't get this now or don't do this now, you will not be able to do it later. So you better do it now or else you're risking missing out on getting it. And to be clear, this isn't like a unique concept to gaming in any stretch of the imagination. This is a thing that's been around for, in fact, it's not even a new concept in general. The concept of FOMO isn't really new. The term is kind of newish, like last several years is when people really started calling it FOMO, but that concept of a limited time thing occurring to motivate people to take action and especially to make a purchase right now because you might not be able to later, that's been something that's been going on for a long, long time, basically throughout the history of commerce in general. So it's not really a new concept. It's just something we're starting to see a lot more inside gaming and the gaming industry. So for example, we're seeing a lot more things like limited time battle passes where battle passes are, again, not terribly new, but we're seeing a lot more of them coming out with limited time periods, and more games are adopting that approach, especially as the concept of a live service game becomes much more popular. So we're seeing a lot more things like battle passes where you're going to make this purchase and you only have the ability to make this purchase for a limited amount of time. And then you have a limited amount of time on top of that to get the rewards. We have, just as a brief aside, we are starting to see more games do battle passes that you can go back to later, which is a nice step in the right direction. But overall, even in those cases, you still have to have purchased the battle pass within this limited time window. So there's still there to essentially create the fear that if you don't make the purchase now, you'll never be able to get these things. Looking to WoW quite recently, we've been seeing a ton of limited time events. throughout the War Within. There's the Collector's Bounty event that's going on where you can get all these mounts and stuff. And that came straight off the back of like 2 other limited time events, probably more that I'm just not thinking of right now. But like the Turbulent Timeways event and the, what was it called? The one with the satchels. What was that called? I noted it down here. Mysterious Fortune. The Mists of Mysterious Fortune or Winds of Mysterious Fortune, whatever it was called. We had all of those limited time events just back to back to back to back, some even overlapping a little bit throughout all of that, as a way to create this sense of you better log in and do this stuff right now. Look at all these rewards you can get. If you don't log in and get it right now, if you don't go farm your mounts right now, it's going to be so much harder to get them later. So you really probably should do that right now. And we'll talk more in a minute about why these sort of things happen and whether they're good or not. I think you guys probably have a sense of what direction I'm going to go with that in some of these particular cases. But still, I want to list off a few more things that could be presented as FOMO or that do create FOMO. And some of them aren't even like intentionally creating FOMO, aren't intended to create FOMO, but can be described that way. So things like pre-purchase or pre-order bonuses. This is the sort of thing where you should buy this game. Blizzard does this a ton with like new expansion pack releases. If you pre-order the next expansion or pre-purchase, I need to use the right terminology there. I'll explain that in a second. You pre-purchase this expansion. Here's all these extra bonuses that you get just for having pre-purchased that. You won't get those if you buy it later. So you should buy it right now before it's even out, because then A, Blizzard gets to sell you on this thing ahead of time. You don't have time to change your mind. And B, they just want that money sooner rather than later. So that's something that they've been doing a lot with these pre-order and pre-purchase bonuses. And a quick aside, just to explain that terminology, pre-order in the gaming industry generally means you have signed up to make a later purchase, but you haven't necessarily made that purchase yet. That's at least from the the finance and marketing side, internally to game publishers and so on. Obviously, people call them pre-orders constantly still nowadays, but the term pre-order often means you are signing up to make a later purchase, whereas a pre-purchase is you've bought the whole thing already and you're just waiting for it to be delivered. And there's important differences there in terms of the amount of money that's being taken up front, as well as the ability to cancel it. A pre-order is something that typically can be canceled, and you might lose your little $5 deposit or whatever it was that you made, but you haven't really lost on anything else. A pre-purchase is a done transaction, and oftentimes the only way you can end up getting a refund on that is if the terms of that pre-purchase agreement that's always there when you're making one of these is somehow violated. So, for example, there were a lot of refunds that were put out for Warcraft 3 Reforged because the release date slipped by so far that it was outside of the window of when the pre-purchase, when people originally were purchasing that, were actually told that they were going to get it. So that was a case where the pre-purchase contract essentially had been breached, so then refunds were offered. Typically speaking, a pre-order is something that can be refunded quite easily. A pre-purchase is, no, you've already done this. You've already made this purchase. It's a done transaction. And that's just an important thing to remember and consider, just in terms of like terminology of how it's not that important. I just thought maybe might be something you guys find interesting. It's a difference in terms of how final that transaction actually is, I guess. Anyway, weird terminology sidetracks aside, talking about a few more things that often tend to be considered to create FOMO or can be described as creating FOMO. Obviously, a big one is like if you have an in-game shop and it has a limited time item, like a new skin for your favorite hero in Marvel Rivals comes up. You look at it and you say, dang, I really want to get this, but this is only available, or at least this bundle is only available for a limited time. I actually haven't seen that too much in Marvel Rivals. It does happen, but it's not as common as it's been in other games. But that is something that happens a lot in a lot of different games. Here's this bundle. You can purchase this right now. There's this skin. You can buy it right now. It's going to go away in a couple of weeks. So if you want it, you have to buy it right now. If you think you might want it, maybe you want to buy it anyway, just in case later you wish you had. And that's where kind of the FOMO aspect of that comes in. And I do include things like the trading post inside that sort of umbrella of in-game purchases, even though the trading post really is like, it's not a for money currency. You're just getting that currency by doing stuff in the game. It's still on a monthly cadence, and you need to be logging in and playing the game and going to this vendor inside of that month. If you want to get any of these items, you need to be earning the tender and purchasing these things off the trading post inside of that given month. It's still something that's there to essentially create FOMO, in the sense of if you don't play, you're going to miss out on these rewards and they're going to be harder for you to get later on. So you should be logging in and playing. It's a way to keep people subscribed. I do feel like the point of that is a little bit different and the nature of that is a little bit different, but we're going to come back around to that. I also want to talk about a couple of things that maybe you wouldn't consider necessarily lumped in as FOMO, but they do still create that in a sense. Raid tiers in World of Warcraft for a long time have effectively created and almost been designed to create a form of FOMO, a form of a fear of missing out, because you know that if you are not actively raiding and you don't complete a raid by the time the next tier comes out, you will at the very least have missed out on the experience of progressing through that raid. Ever since we went away from Classic and the feeling of having to progress through Classic and TBC to an extent, even Wrath actually a little bit, but anyway, for a long time, WoW Retail at the very least has been very much in the sense of when a new raid tier comes out, the previous tier is just kind of non-content anymore. Like, yeah, you can still go do it, and some people still will, but it's become so much easier by virtue of a whole new tier of gear being available to everyone that you've missed out now on the experience of progressing through that raid as it was originally intended, as it was originally created, with the difficulty and the progression through it as it might have been originally intended. And that may or may not be something that you actually care about as a player. It might be something you just say, I don't really care. I just want to kill the bosses and get the drops off of them. I don't care if it's extra hard for me or not. And that's fine. But it's worth noting for many players, especially those in the like mythic rating scene and even the heroic rating scene, there is that fear of, if I don't know if fear is the right word, but there's that sense of, if I don't progress through this raid tier before the next one comes out, I will have missed out on some of the content as it was originally intended to be experienced. So there is a little bit of FOMO just in the nature of the way raid content releases. And we mentioned limited time events earlier, and WoW has had limited time events for a long, long time. Many games have these. Like things like even just the holiday events inside of WoW, like Brewfest and Noble Garden and that sort of thing. These are essentially things that you can get some rewards from. Like maybe you want to get the Headless Horseman's reins. You want to get that mount. You can only get that during this certain time period when the Hollow's End event is going on. So you better get in there right now, or you are going to miss out on your chances to get that mount. That's something that's existed in WoW for a long, long time. All the way back to Classic, if I remember correctly. Like that Hollow's End event has been around for a long, long time. So many of these other events have as well. They are something that is essentially there to create FOMO, which does bring me to one small point that I wanted to make. And this is not the core point of this episode, so don't come at me. But I do want to note that not everything that creates that feeling of FOMO is inherently bad. Like, I don't think anyone's mad at the holiday events in World of Warcraft. I don't think anyone's mad that you can't farm the Headless Horseman's reins outside of the Hollow's End event. You might be mad that you didn't get it. You might be upset that the drop rate wasn't high enough to be able to get it. And that's an opinion that is certainly valid to have. There's different ways that people can approach this. But you're not upset that the Hollow's End event has a start and an end time. That's just a normal thing. You wouldn't expect that to be around all year. And I mentioned the trading post earlier. I don't know anyone who is mad about the trading post. Like, the trading post seems like a very good addition to WoW, to me at least. The trading post seems like a great addition to WoW. It's a great way to put out some cosmetics and add that sort of ability and that collection gameplay into the game in a way that isn't just go and buy things off of the in-game shop. It's a great way to provide a lot of that sort of experience without asking players for extra money all the time. I like the trading post quite a bit. I always look forward to seeing, even when I'm not super actively playing the game, I always look forward to seeing what's new on the trading post, because you never know. Next time I come back around, maybe I want to be a Ninja Turtle. Like, it's cool, and I like that sort of thing. It is definitely there to create a bit of FOMO. It's definitely there to encourage you to do stuff right now instead of waiting and trying to do it later, because you're going to miss out on the opportunity to get these things if you wait for too long. But it's not necessarily inherently a bad thing. Again, there are definitely very predatory ways, and we're going to talk about some of them here in a minute, that developers and publishers and so on, game studios, have been tending to use FOMO nowadays, and it's been getting really, really bad with a few games. I just want to make sure that there's that understanding that just because something causes you to feel like you might miss out if you don't do it right now, does not inherently automatically always make it a bad thing. It's certainly something to side-eye a little bit, but there are good things that can be added to video games that do still give you that sense of, I want to log in right now. In a lot of ways, things like the limited time holiday events in WoW, things like the trading post, they're less about making sure that you feel like, oh God, I have to play today or else I'm going to miss out on this thing. And more like giving you something to do maybe during times when you otherwise wouldn't be as interested if you still want to keep playing the game. Obviously, they can still create that first sort of feeling that I just described there. They can still create that FOMO sort of feeling. But for me, at least, they tend to fall more into the category of this is just something to keep the game interesting and something new to do that isn't necessarily reliant on a new season or a new raid or a new battleground or whatever coming out. But knowing that there are these other more predatory ways that developers often do utilize FOMO, and to be clear, I think there's lots of ways that Blizzard does this with WoW as well. Let's talk a little bit more about why that is. What is it about FOMO that makes it so attractive to a game developer, to a publisher, to try and create this environment in which you feel like you need to log in right now? And I know that sentence sounds kind of like it just answered itself, right? Like they want you to log in right now. But I do think it's worth exploring the logic behind this a little bit. I think a lot of times the finance people, the numbers people, the money people, and oftentimes even the developers themselves will look at this sort of thing and they will see it less as trying to encourage you to make a purchase you otherwise wouldn't have, and more as you're probably interested in this thing already. They're just trying to give you the motivation to go ahead and do it as opposed to waiting later on. And that I'm going to talk in a minute about how that there's that sort of like what's the word I'm looking for here? That the distinction, separation. It's a different way of thinking that isn't necessarily the same as what the player experience is going to. In fact, it's very different from what the player experience often is. But I think a lot of times they see it as a way to encourage you as the player to go ahead and make that purchase that otherwise you wouldn't have. Like maybe there's a skin in Overwatch or something, and you look at it and you say, dang, that's a cool skin. I'd kind of like to, I don't play that character a ton, but I like the skin. I think it looks cool. If it was something that was just sitting there for a long period of time, you would probably not buy it. You'd probably just look at it and go, that's a cool skin. If I ever decide to start playing that character, I'll go ahead and purchase that skin, and then I'll have it available. If you knew that was going to be available for purchase later on. But if you don't know that, if you're sitting there and you're like, it looks cool, I might play this character more at some point in the future, that might be enough to convince you to go ahead and make that purchase now, so that way you know that you'll have that later on. The difference, I think, and the sort of disconnect between how the developer / publisher / whatever tends to look at this and how the player tends to look at this is the player looks at this and they see, I don't actually even know if I want this, but I might at some point. So later on, if I can't buy it later on, but I do want it later on, then I should have bought it now. And there's that sort of, again, that fear of having missed out on it. There's that sense of, I'm not convinced I want to buy this, but if I don't buy this, then I can't have it, and I might want it later, so I should buy it now. And I think that's the part of this whole FOMO thing that players really hate. Like that feels awful, and it feels predatory, and it feels bad. I think oftentimes the people who are putting this together in the first place try to explain it maybe even to themselves a little bit more in a sense of like, well, you clearly kind of wanted this. We just needed to get you across the finish line so you actually went ahead and made that purchase. And I think that's part of why this process has become so widespread, because there's just a different thinking in terms of you're the person trying to sell the thing. Of course, you want to do anything that you can to get somebody to try and buy it. Whereas if you're the person being sold the thing, you feel a little bit like someone's trying to pull one over on you a little bit by saying, you might want this later, so you should buy it right now. And I think that's the core reason that people, including myself, hate a lot of the way that this works out so much, because that sense of, if I don't buy this right now, I can never have it. And I'm not sure if I even want it, but I might want it at some later point. That feels pretty bad. This is something I personally have been going through with Marvel Snap a lot lately, where they've changed enough around of how their monetization and everything works that right now there's a bunch of cards that you can get, but you basically have to spend money to be able to get them. You have to buy like the premium battle pass and everything to be able to get these cards. And they're cards that I'm looking at, I'm like, I might eventually make a deck that I want to be able to use these cards in, and I'm not going to be able to just buy them later. So maybe I should buy them right now, even though I'm not planning to use them right now, because I won't be able to buy them later on. And that's the sort of like mental gymnastics that ultimately makes you kind of just not even want to play that game that much anymore. And that to me is a little bit different than something like the remix events or the Plunderstorm events in World of Warcraft, where those were things that you just got. And yes, there were rewards attached to them. And yes, you needed to play them to get those rewards. And yes, they were only available for a limited time. But things like Plunderstorm and Remix to me felt more like this is an added thing that's being added to my subscription fee that I'm already paying, as opposed to something else that you're trying to draw money out of my wallet for in the hopes that I will go ahead and make that purchase because I might want it later. Like a lot of those limited time events, again, even like things like Plunderstorm and WoW Remix, those feel like things that to me, I'm not upset about those in terms of the, yes, there is FOMO attached to those, but it's not the type of FOMO that I'm upset about personally, because it just feels like more stuff to do for what I'm already spending in terms of money. Yes, technically it does theoretically like keep you subscribed more. Like maybe I end up paying for another month of sub, whereas I would have canceled my subscription and come back later or something like that. Yes, this is all possible ways that they could still be earning extra money out of players for it, and probably are. But to me, it feels a little bit different in that sense. Just the way that it ends up getting presented to the player feels a little bit different. And especially in 2025, with so many live service, like it feels like every game is a live service game these days. Even the games that aren't live service games, the live service games have become so common that players tend to expect games that aren't live service to give live service sort of approach, like constant DLCs. Oh, I hope they do constant balance passes on this. I hope they keep coming out with new content for it. I hope they keep releasing new things. It's like, well, it's not a live service game, so they're probably not going to do that. If they're not like continually making income off of it, there's a point where they will say, we've made all the updates we're going to make to this. We're going to stop making updates now. That's just kind of how games tend to be. And a lot of games will continue to do post-launch support for a while these days because there's that expectation that's there, but even still aren't live service games. Aside from all of that, that's a whole separate topic though. The fact is FOMO is such a common thing because of the number of live service games that I think it's actually kind of starting to fall apart a little bit. When every game that you play is competing for your attention constantly, or there's just a large number of games that are constantly telling you, hey, you better log in right now because look at this FOMO right here. And then there's this one over here. And then there's this thing and there's this thing and there's this thing. When you are having your attention dragged in so many different directions because all of these different games are all trying to compete to give you FOMO at the same time, the reality is a lot of gamers, myself included, are just starting to get kind of numb to it. Like we don't actually care that much anymore. Like you just kind of eventually reach a point where you just accept that games are going to come out with limited time events, and I am not going to have time to do that limited time event on top of all these other limited time events. So I guess I'm just going to miss out on that one. And after that happens a few times, you just start to become more okay with the fact that sometimes a limited time event happens. Sometimes a limited time purchase comes up. Sometimes there's something that really wants you to do it right now, and you just have to look at it and say, nah. And I think we're seeing that come to fruition in multiple different ways. One is just generally, I feel like live service games are having a harder and harder time selling players the constant amount of new stuff that they're trying to sell. But there are definitely still very successful live service games, don't get me wrong, but it's harder for especially a new live service game to compete for that attention when it's being created in a way where it needs to be your primary game that you're spending a ton of time on in order to function, in order to sustain itself. We're seeing a lot of games start to trend away from that. In fact, we're actually seeing a pretty big resurgence in terms of like games with a definitive start and end. So like single player games like Baldur's Gate 3, Expedition 33. There are a lot of games like those games have it's not like those are coming out of nowhere and no one's been making single player games for a while, but we're starting to see a lot more people who previously would have been spending all their time on Call of Duty or World of Warcraft or Diablo or whatever else it is. They would have been spending all their time on these like constant treadmill live service games. And we're starting to see a lot more of those players come to appreciate a game that they can say, okay, I'm going to buy this game. I'm going to play it for however many hours, 20 to 80 hours, if you're looking at something like Expedition 33. Longer than that if you try to do absolutely everything in Baldur's Gate. I'm going to play this for an amount of time. I will eventually be done with this game and I will not play it anymore. And that's all right, because I will have gotten my 40, 50, $60 worth out of the game in that amount of time. We're seeing gamers making that sort of decision much more regularly than we have in prior years. And again, that's not to say that those games weren't existing prior and that they weren't selling prior. I just think if you look back over the last several, like look back at what the game of the year was over the last like 5 to 10 years, and you're going to see this sort of trend toward the sort of single player start and end. We started it, we played it for a while, we finished it, and we look back and said that was a great experience, but it's done now. We're starting to see a lot more appreciation for that throughout the gamer sphere than we have for the prior decade, essentially. And we're actually starting to see a lot more of those dip their toes into multiplayer experiences as well. There's a lot of multiplayer co-op stuff, especially where you're meant to play through with friends, but it's still like you're going to get your group of friends together. They're going to play this game for a while, and then you will eventually finish it, and that's it. You're done. Games like Grounded is one that Grounded 2 is coming out here real soon. Looking forward to playing that with a bunch of friends. Eventually, we will stop playing it, and we will just be like, okay, we did that, and we had fun. Games like Split Fiction and the other games from that studio. These are games that are mandatory co-op, but they're very much you're going to play this with a friend for a day or two, and then you're going to be done with it, but you will have enjoyed the experience that you had while you were there. Elden Ring Night Rain was another one that came out recently that kind of surprised me how well it actually ended up doing for what it was, where it almost kind of seemed a little bit like a live service game. Like there was enough about it that made it seem like maybe they were kind of leaning towards a live service game with it. In fact, I think if Night Rain had come out 5 or 6 years ago, it would have absolutely been like there would have been a battle pass. There would have been an in-game cosmetic shop. They would have stuffed all that stuff in there. Not necessarily that FromSoft would have done that, but if FromSoft decided to make that game back then, that's probably the direction they would have needed to go. Which maybe that's why they didn't. But it's really interesting how much that game feels almost live service-ish, but it really is a game that you play it. You defeat all the bosses. Eventually you have done everything you feel like doing in that game, and now you're done with it. That's it. You move on. You have finished that game. Yes, they've added a bunch of new bosses and stuff to it, but I expect we're not going to see much out of that in terms of ongoing constant support, outside of maybe they'll come out with some DLCs with some new content in the future. And on the flip side, we're starting to see more and more pushback against games that do kind of demand constant attention. Like I've been playing a ton of Dune Awakening lately. And I'm still very invested in the game. I'm still playing it a lot, but we're reaching the point where there's a lot of players who play Dune who are now worried about, wait, if I take a break from this game for a while, am I just going to lose all of my stuff? Because there's like upkeep on your bases. You do need to be able to like keep them powered, and pay the like Solari tax. And it doesn't take a ton of time to keep up with that, but it is like a chore that you have to remember to do every week or two to go in and make sure that your taxes are paid and make sure that your power is all still there. So there are a lot of players who are starting to try and figure out like, okay, how do I move everything that I need into the smaller version of a base so that way I don't have to pay taxes? And can I tuck this away in this corner somewhere so that it also doesn't need to have power going to it as well? There's lots of different ways that people are trying to figure out how to maintain this stuff, but there's definitely at the same time this big sort of central core of feedback being directed toward Funcom right now of, I want to be able to take a break from this game for a while. And Dune Awakening is also not really something I would consider a live service game in a sense. Like they have a DLC plan. They're planning to come out with more content for it. And they've been doing a bunch of patching and stuff for it, mostly plugging up like exploits and stuff. But it's not something that it doesn't have a subscription fee. It doesn't have a battle pass. It doesn't have an in-game shop. It's missing out on all the normal trappings of a live service game. But even in that case, it's still something that players are looking at this and saying, but I want to be able to step away from this game for an extended period of time and maybe come back to it later. And I can't do that right now. So I think across the gaming sphere as a whole, across the way that gamers are and players are approaching video games these days, we are seeing this almost rejection of live service games as time is going on, which I believe honestly comes from a core of starting to reject that feeling of FOMO. That concept of FOMO is just not working on gamers the way that it used to. And what I find interesting, the most interesting about that And in fact, a little bit heartening, not just from the fact that it means that live service games, like games that are trying to nickel and dime you constantly, it's not really working nearly as well as it did. So developers have to figure out different stuff. But it also means that in this environment, it's so much easier for a smaller or an indie studio to be able to create something, because gamers are once again becoming much more okay with the concept of, I'm going to buy this game. I'll buy it for $10. I will play it for 20 hours and then I will never play it ever again. But that is considered to be a good use of that $10 much more commonly these days than it has been over the last several years, because of that deluge of live service games that we had, which means that it's so much easier for a team of like a very small team. In fact, a small team has a huge advantage in that sort of environment. Like realistically, if you don't need to support 500 to 1,000 employees and also an overpaid executive suite all at the same time with your title that you're coming out with, you can get away with making a game that says, yeah, we're going to release this in July. We'll get a big bunch of money that comes in when people buy it in July. And then we'll just have to sit on that money until we come out with our next game. You can do that with a small studio if you only have like 5 to 10 people that are working on your game. It's much more feasible for those small and indie and even solo developers to be able to support themselves off of that. Whereas the huge AAA developers kind of can't. Like they need constant ongoing incoming income to be able to continue paying their huge numbers of employees and, again, overpaid executive staff. Which brings me back around to a point that I've made many times on this show over the last year and a half now that I've been doing it, which is that AAA development is in a really bad spot right now, and it has to figure out how to adapt if it's going to survive. Like, I strongly believe that gaming as an industry is going to be fine. In fact, I think we're likely to come out the other end of this much better off than we are. But it's very possible that AAA gaming is going to continue to nosedive, and we will not see the huge giga mega publishers doing nearly as much in the future. I don't think they're going to like die off. I don't think there's any risk of Microsoft or Activision or whatever just like shutting down and no longer existing. But I think they've got to figure out how they're going to continue to adapt and how they're going to evolve and how they're going to be able to live in this space when gamers are starting to reject basically the core tenets of what their business model thrives off of. What we've seen them trying to do so far is mass layoffs to try and save costs. But not only is that really obviously a very temporary solution to the problem, it also kind of, in my opinion, is shooting themselves in the foot. Like, if you look through Steam and like the upcoming releases or recent releases thing, just for educational purposes, you probably see some stuff that you don't actually want to look at. So just be real careful what you click on in there. But go and look through the Steam new releases section at some point. You're going to see a whole bunch of stuff in there that is clearly like just one random person decided today I'm going to make a video game, and they were able to put it on Steam and they can get it out there. It is so easy is the wrong word, but there's so much less friction and so much less that needs to be done to put out a game these days that any rando can actually put something together and get it on Steam. Even if it doesn't work very well, you can still get it out there. Imagine what happens when a bunch of very experienced, very talented developers suddenly find themselves without a job and think to themselves, the 5 of us could probably make our own game pretty well, and we could put that on Steam and we could sell that and it might do well. Now, the reality is most indie games still don't make it. If you look through that recent releases thing on Steam, you're going to see a whole lot of games that will not sell. They just won't. There's going to be a lot of stuff on there that doesn't go anywhere. But when layoffs are happening to the tune of 500 to 1,000 employees on such a regular basis, you don't need every single one of those developers as from the perspective of the AAA publisher laying these people off. It doesn't matter if every single one of those developers doesn't come out with a brand new product that takes people's attention away from whatever it is that you've been working on. If 1% of them are able to make something happen, if you lay off 1,000 employees, 10 new studios pop up as a part of that, and only one of them comes out with something good that people are excited about, that's still taking profits away from you. That's still that's people's attention that is being pulled away from your live service game that you're clinging to so hard, to the extent that it kind of doesn't matter if most of the other ones are still screwed from the perspective of the AAA development team. Like they're still getting stuff done, and it still is costing them the ability to put out, like, they would be smarter to find ways to put out games themselves with these developers instead of sending them out into the world to create their own things for not them. I don't know. The short-sightedness of the AAA gaming environment right now continues to shock me. Like, I understand greed, but this is beyond greed. This is just like being dumb and short-sighted and not really seeing that you're about to plow your industry into a wall. So I don't know. We'll see how that shakes out. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they still continue to make money hand over fist and it's completely and totally fine, and we're still going to get a million of the same game released constantly. But I actually do feel optimistic that even though the gaming industry is in a pretty awful state right now, I think the result is that we're seeing more indie studios, more creativity, more small studios, more people able to take charge of their own destiny in the concept and in the confines of the gaming industry. To the point where I think it's going to end up in a better state than where we were prior. But anyway, that's going to wrap us up for today. Thank you all so much for watching. And once again, welcome to the new channel. Please do remember to hit that subscribe button. Anything subscribing, ringing the bell, I guess is what it's called, turning on notifications, leaving a comment, anything that you guys can do to click buttons related to this video definitely helps out a lot. Every single little bit of that will help tremendously toward getting this new channel off the ground. And I greatly appreciate all of it. Speaking of comments, if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer here on the show, please do go ahead and leave a comment below. You can put your question right in there. Or if you're a patron, you can head over to patreon.com/Devilore, where you will find a link to fill out a form that will get you priority on getting your question answered here on the show. So if you're a patron, patreon.com/Devilore, there's a form in the listing for this episode over there. Go ahead and use that form. Otherwise, right here on YouTube, you can just leave a comment, and I will be happy to answer any questions that I can in the next episode. Also, if there's other topics that you guys want to see me talking about, I'm happy to take any suggestions that we get for topics. I will give an extra, once again, shout out to my patrons. Thank you so much, everyone who has been subscribed over on patreon.com/dev. I'm just going to say that a bunch today, apparently. Everyone who's been subscribed over on Patreon, I really do appreciate it. The support is what makes it even possible for me to try things like moving this to a new channel. If it wasn't for Patreon, I would not be able to do this. So thank you all so much for all of the support. I really do appreciate it. Yeah, I guess that pretty much wraps us up. Thanks again, everybody. I'll see you later.